The television studio lights blazed hot as Kellyanne Conway sat across from Jasmine Crockett, her face already flushed with anger before the cameras even started rolling. What happened in the next 30 seconds would break the internet and show America, the stark difference between rage and grace under pressure. Conway, the former White House counselor known for her fiery exchanges, had come prepared for war. Crockett, the young congresswoman from Texas, sat calmly in her navy blue blazer, hands folded, completely unaware that she was about to become the most talked-about politician in America. "You think you can just waltz in here and lecture me about politics?" Conway's voice cracked as she leaned forward, her blonde hair whipping as she gestured wildly. "You're nothing but a freshman politician who doesn't know her place." But what came next left the entire studio in stunned silence. Crockett's response was so perfectly calm, so devastatingly effective, that within hours it would be viewed by millions and turn her into a viral sensation overnight. Before we dive into this incredible showdown, hit that subscribe button and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. You won't want to miss what happens when experienced political rage meets unshakable composure. The studio fell dead quiet. The host looked between them, clearly unprepared for what was about to unfold. And Jasmine Crockett, with a slight smile, playing at the corners of her mouth, was about to deliver one of the most memorable political moments of the year. To understand the earthquake that was about to hit American politics, you need to know exactly who these two women are and why this confrontation mattered so much. Kellyanne Conway. At 57, she's a political veteran who's been in the game for decades. Former campaign manager for Donald Trump's 2016 presidential victory, former White House counselor, and a woman who built her reputation on never backing down from a fight. Conway made her name by going toe-to-toe with the toughest journalists in Washington, coining phrases that became part of political history. She's known for her sharp tongue, her ability to deflect criticism, and her absolute refusal to be intimidated by anyone. Conway came into this studio with her usual confidence. Dressed in her signature style, a crisp white blazer over a black top, her blonde hair perfectly styled, her blue eyes sharp with the intensity of someone who's survived every political storm Washington could throw at her. She had notebooks, full of talking points, years of experience handling hostile media, and the absolute certainty that she could overwhelm any opponent with sheer force of personality. But sitting across from her was someone completely different. Jasmine Crockett. At just 42, the congresswoman from Texas represents a new generation of political leaders. A former public defender turned civil rights attorney turned politician, Crockett built her career fighting for people who couldn't fight for themselves. She won her congressional seat by connecting with voters who felt forgotten by traditional politicians. Unlike Conway's decades in the political machine, Crockett's power comes from her ability to stay calm under pressure and speak directly to people's real concerns. Crockett chose her outfit carefully that morning, a navy blue blazer that conveyed authority without being flashy, minimal jewelry, her hair styled simply. Everything about her appearance said professional, approachable, unintimidated. She had a different kind of preparation than Conway's talking points and attack strategies. Crockett had something much more powerful: absolute confidence in her own truth and the ability to stay calm when others lost control. This wasn't just another political debate. This was a clash between two completely different philosophies of political combat. Conway represented the old school, the idea that you win by being louder, more aggressive, more willing to attack. Crockett represented something new, the power of staying calm, speaking truth, and letting your opponent defeat themselves. The topic that brought them together was explosive: voting rights legislation that had divided Congress and the country. Conway had come to defend the traditional conservative position, while Crockett was there to advocate for expanded voting access. But everyone in that studio knew this was about much more than policy. This was about two different visions of how political discourse should work in America. The host, sensing the tension crackling between them, tried to start with softballs. But Conway wasn't interested in softball. She had come for a fight, and she was going to get one, just not the kind she expected. Conway's strategy was clear from the moment she sat down. Overwhelm Crockett with aggressive questioning, force her into defensive positions, and use her decades of experience to make the younger Congresswoman look inexperienced and unprepared. It was a strategy that had worked countless times before against other politicians and journalists. But Jasmine Crockett isn't other politicians, and Conway was about to learn that the hard way. The cameras rolled, the lights heated up, and America was about to witness a masterclass in how composure can be more powerful than aggression, how truth can be more effective than tactics, and how sometimes the person who speaks quietly can be heard louder than the person who screams. The tension in the studio was thick enough to cut with a knife as the host opened the segment. We're here today to discuss the voting rights legislation currently before Congress. Joining us are former White House counselor Kellyanne Conway and Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett from Texas. Conway didn't even wait for a question. She launched immediately into attack mode. "Let me be clear from the start," Conway said, her voice already rising. "This so-called voting rights bill is nothing but a federal takeover of elections designed to help Democrats steal votes. And I'm tired of freshman politicians like Ms. Crockett here pretending they understand the complexities of election law." Crockett sat perfectly still, her hands folded, a slight smile on her face. "Thank you, Kellyanne. I appreciate you sharing your perspective." The calm response seemed to infuriate Conway even more. Her face flushed red as she leaned forward. "Don't patronize me, Congresswoman. I was managing presidential campaigns when you were still in law school. I know what voter fraud looks like, and this bill makes it easier." "Actually," Crockett replied, her voice steady and clear, "I'd love to hear about specific examples of the voter fraud you're concerned about. What evidence are you referencing?" Conway's eyes flashed. This wasn't going according to her script. She was used to opponents who would match her aggression, who would raise their voices and get pulled into shouting matches. But Crockett's calm professionalism was throwing her completely off balance. "Evidence!" Conway's voice cracked as it got higher. "The evidence is everywhere. Dead people voting, illegal immigrants voting, ballot harvesting in swing states. But politicians like you don't want to acknowledge it because it doesn't fit your narrative." Behind the cameras, the studio crew was exchanging glances. The sound engineer adjusted his headphones, wincing as Conway's voice hit frequencies that made the equipment protest. The director quietly signaled to keep rolling. This was television gold, even if it wasn't the kind anyone had expected. In the control room, producers were frantically checking social media feeds. Already, clips were being shared in real time by viewers watching the live broadcast. Comments were pouring in. "Is Conway okay?" And "Crockett is handling this like a boss," and "This is painful to watch." The host tried to interject. "Can we focus on the specific provisions of the bill?" "No!" Conway shouted, cutting him off. "I'm tired of being interrupted. I'm tired of being lectured by people who don't know what they're talking about. This woman," she pointed directly at Crockett, "this woman has been in Congress for what, 2 years? And she thinks she can come on here and school me about politics?" Throughout Conway's outburst, Crockett remained completely calm. She took a sip of water, checked her notes briefly, and maintained the same pleasant expression. When Conway finally paused to breathe, Crockett spoke in the same measured tone. "I understand you're passionate about this issue, Kellyanne. Passion is important in politics, but I think our viewers would benefit from discussing actual facts rather than talking points." Conway's face went from red to purple. "Facts? You want to talk about facts? The fact is that you and your party are trying to destroy election integrity in this country. You're trying to make it impossible for states to verify that voters are who they say they are." "Which specific provision of the bill are you referring to?" Crockett asked calmly. "Because I have the legislation right here if you'd like to discuss specific language." Conway slammed her hand on the desk. "Don't play games with me. You know exactly what I'm talking about. This bill eliminates voter ID requirements, allows ballot harvesting, and prevents states from cleaning up their voter rolls." "It's a recipe for chaos," Crockett nodded thoughtfully. I appreciate you raising those concerns. However, the bill actually strengthens voter ID requirements by ensuring all Americans have access to free identification. It doesn't eliminate ID requirements. It makes them more accessible. Would you like me to show you the specific section? Conway was now visibly shaking with anger. Stop trying to manipulate the facts. I know what this bill says. I've read it cover to cover. And I know what your real agenda is. What do you believe my agenda is? Crockett asked with genuine curiosity. Your agenda is to make it easier for Democrats to cheat, Conway screamed, her voice reaching a pitch that made the sound engineers wince. Your agenda is to flood the system with illegal votes so you can stay in power. That's what this is really about. The studio fell silent except for Conway's heavy breathing. She realized she had just accused a sitting congresswoman of conspiracy to commit election fraud on live television. And even she seemed to understand. She had gone too far. Crockett let the silence hang for a moment. Then, in the same calm voice she had used throughout the entire exchange, she said, Kellyanne, I took an oath to defend the Constitution. Every vote I cast, every bill I support, is guided by that oath and by my commitment to serving the people who elected me. I believe democracy is stronger when more eligible Americans can participate in it. Conway tried to recover. That's exactly the kind of political speak I'm talking about. You say one thing, but you mean another. What do you think I mean? Crockett asked. Conway's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. She had built her entire attack around the assumption that Crockett would respond with equal aggression, giving Conway the chance to escalate further. But every calm question, every measured response, every refusal to take the bait was making Conway look more unhinged by the minute. The host, sensing the dynamic, tried to give Conway a lifeline. Let's talk about specific state election laws. I don't need help, Conway snapped at him. I can handle this myself. She turned back to Crockett, her voice now hoarse from shouting. You think you're so smart, don't you? You think because you stay calm and use your lawyer voice that you're winning this debate? Crockett tilted her head slightly. I don't think of this as something to win or lose, Kellyanne. I think of it as an opportunity to have a conversation about how we can make our democracy work better for everyone. Conway stared at her in disbelief. She had thrown everything she had at this woman, personal attacks, conspiracy theories, accusations of treason, and Crockett had responded to all of it with the same unflappable professionalism. The cameras captured every second of Conway's meltdown and Crockett's composure. Social media was already exploding with clips of Conway screaming while Crockett remained calm. Jasmine Crockett was starting to trend, and Conway meltdown wasn't far behind. But the real fireworks were still to come. Because Conway, realizing that her usual tactics weren't working, was about to make a desperate attempt to regain control. And that's when Jasmine Crockett would deliver the response that would make her a viral sensation. Conway was spiraling, and everyone in the studio could see it. Her carefully styled hair was now slightly disheveled from her animated gestures, her face remained flushed red, and her voice had gone hoarse from shouting. The makeup artist in the wings was shaking her head, knowing there wasn't enough powder in the world to fix what was happening to Conway's appearance on camera. Security personnel near the studio entrance had subtly moved closer, not because they expected physical violence, but because Conway's emotional state was becoming genuinely concerning. The show's medical consultant, always on standby during live broadcasts, was quietly checking her blood pressure monitor and wondering if she should intervene. But instead of recognizing that she was losing control, Conway decided to escalate even further. You know what your problem is? Conway said, pointing a shaking finger at Crockett. Your problem is that you think being calm makes you right. You think that because you don't raise your voice, people will think you're the adult in the room. But I see right through you. Crockett maintained her composed posture, hands still folded, expression still pleasant. What do you see, Kellyanne? I see a politician who's trying to manipulate people. Conway's voice cracked as she reached a new decibel level. I see someone who thinks she can come on television and act all sweet and reasonable while she's pushing legislation that will destroy our democracy. The host made another attempt to regain control. Perhaps we could discuss the constitutional issues. The Constitution? Conway whirled on him. Don't talk to me about the Constitution. I defended the Constitution for 4 years in the White House while she was probably still figuring out how to be a politician. She spun back to face Crockett, her entire body now trembling with rage. You want to talk about the Constitution? The Constitution doesn't say anywhere that we have to make voting so easy that fraud becomes inevitable. The Constitution doesn't say that we have to ignore common-sense security measures. Crockett nodded thoughtfully. You're absolutely right that the Constitution doesn't say those things. What it does say, in the 14th and 15th Amendments, is that all citizens have the right to vote, and that this right cannot be denied or abridged. The question is how we balance security with access. Conway slammed both hands on the desk this time, making her water glass jump. Stop being so reasonable, she screamed. Stop acting like you're above this. I know who you really are. The studio fell dead silent. Conway had just screamed at someone for being reasonable. The absurdity of it hung in the air like smoke from an explosion. Crockett let the silence stretch for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was even calmer than before, almost gentle. Kellyanne, she said. And there was something in her tone, not condescending, not angry, but almost compassionate. I can see that you're upset, and I understand why these issues matter so much to you. They matter to me too. But I think we can disagree about policy without questioning each other's character or motives. Conway stared at her in stunned silence. For the first time since the segment began, she seemed at a loss for words. Crockett continued, her voice still gentle, but now carrying the authority of someone who had found her moment. You've spent a lot of time today talking about what you think I believe and what you think I'm trying to do. But you haven't asked me a single question about what I actually believe or why I support this legislation. Conway's mouth opened, but no sound came out. So let me tell you, Crockett said, leaning forward slightly. I support this bill because I've seen what happens when people can't vote. I was a public defender for years before I came to Congress. I saw how many of my clients had been disenfranchised by the justice system. I saw elderly people who couldn't get to the DMV to renew their ID. I saw working parents who couldn't take time off to vote during limited hours. She paused, her eyes never leaving Conway's face. I didn't support this bill because I want Democrats to win. I supported it because I want democracy to win. Conway finally found her voice, but it came out as a whisper. That's not what this bill does. Then help me understand what you think it does, Crockett said. Not what you think my motives are. Not what talking points you've been given. Tell me what specific language in the bill concerns you and why. For the first time in the entire segment, Conway looked down at her notes. She shuffled through papers, clearly trying to find something, anything, to support the arguments she had been making. The cameras captured every second of her searching, the silence stretching uncomfortably long. When she looked up, some of the fight had gone out of her eyes. The provision about voter roll maintenance, she said, her voice now normal, volume for the first time. States need to be able to clean their rolls, Crockett nodded. I agree completely. And this bill doesn't prevent that. What it does is require that states use reliable data sources and give voters notice before removing them. Would you support those requirements? Conway blinked. She had come prepared for a fight, not for a policy discussion. Well, notice is important, but you're concerned about the timeline? Crockett suggested helpfully. Yes, the timeline could allow dead voters to remain on rolls through an election cycle. Crockett pulled out her copy of the bill. Actually, the bill requires immediate removal upon proof of death. The notice requirement only applies to address changes and other updates. Would you like to see the specific section? Conway looked at the bill, then at Crockett, then back at the bill. The woman who had spent 20 minutes screaming about election fraud suddenly looked very small in her chair. I may have misunderstood that provision, she said quietly. The admission hung in the air like a confession. Conway, the political veteran who had built her reputation on never admitting error, had just acknowledged that she had been wrong. But Crockett wasn't done. With the same gentle tone, she continued, "It's easy to misunderstand complex legislation, especially when we're getting our information from summaries rather than the actual text. That's why I always try to read the bills myself before forming opinions." Conway nodded slowly, looking like a deflated balloon. "And that's why," Crockett said, her voice still calm but now carrying unmistakable authority, "I think it's important that we have these conversations based on facts rather than assumptions about each other's character. Because when we start from the assumption that people we disagree with are evil or stupid or corrupt, we stop listening to each other. And democracy can't work without listening." The host, who had been sitting in stunned silence watching Conway's complete transformation, finally found his voice. "Congresswoman Crockett, that's a powerful point about the importance of civil discourse." Conway looked up, seeming to remember where she was. I apologize if I got too heated," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "These issues are important to me." "They're important to me too," Crockett replied with a warm smile. "And that's exactly why we should be able to discuss them respectfully." The cameras captured it all: Conway's complete meltdown, her gradual realization that she had been wrong, and her quiet apology. But most of all, they captured Jasmine Crockett's masterclass in how to respond to political aggression with grace, facts, and unshakable composure. Within minutes of the segment ending, clips were spreading across social media like wildfire. But it wasn't just Conway's screaming that was going viral. It was Crockett's response, calm, factual, and devastatingly effective. She had turned what was supposed to be an attack on her credibility into a demonstration of exactly the kind of leadership America needed. The woman who had been called a freshman politician who doesn't know her place had just shown the entire country that sometimes the most powerful response to someone screaming is to speak quietly and carry the truth. Kite. Transformation in the studio was immediate and palpable. As the cameras stopped rolling, Kellyanne Conway sat slumped in her chair, staring down at her notes as if seeing them for the first time. The woman who had entered with such confidence, ready to demolish a younger opponent, now looked exhausted and confused. Jasmine Crockett, meanwhile, quietly gathered her materials with the same composed demeanor she had maintained throughout the entire confrontation. But the real explosion was happening online. Within 5 minutes of the segment ending, Jasmine Crockett was trending on Twitter. The clips were everywhere, Conway screaming, "Stop being so reasonable!" While Crockett maintained perfect composure became an instant meme. But it wasn't just the screaming that caught fire. It was Crockett's response that really captured America's attention. The first viral clip showed Conway's meltdown with Crockett's calm response, captioned, "When someone yells at you for being reasonable." It hit 100,000 views in the first hour and just kept climbing. But the clip that really exploded was longer. It showed Conway's accusation that Crockett was trying to manipulate people, followed by Crockett's gentle but firm response about democracy and listening. A prominent civil rights attorney shared it with the caption, "This is what leadership looks like in 2024. Calm, factual, and focused on solving problems instead of creating drama." Political commentators across the spectrum were struggling to process what they had just witnessed. Even conservative voices found it difficult to defend Conway's performance. A well-known Republican strategist tweeted, "I've known Kellyanne for years and this isn't her best work. Crockett handled this masterfully, stayed calm, stuck to facts, and made her point without raising her voice. That's political skill." The internet did what the internet does best. It turned Conway's meltdown into comedy gold. Memes flooded social media with Conway screaming paired with captions like, "When someone asks you to cite your sources," while side-by-side photos showed her face getting progressively redder throughout the segment like a political mood ring. Creative users took Crockett's calm expression and added the "this is fine" text from the famous dog and fire meme, perfectly capturing her unflappable demeanor amid Conway's chaos. Perhaps the most popular format showed Conway pointing and screaming, with various everyday captions like, "When the restaurant is out of your favorite menu item," or "When Netflix removes your show mid-season." But what made this meme explosion unique was that the jokes weren't particularly mean-spirited toward Conway. Instead, many actually celebrated Crockett's composure rather than simply mocking her opponent's loss of control. The most shared meme showed Crockett maintaining her pleasant expression with the caption, "How to win an argument without raising your voice," a masterclass, turning the viral moment into a genuine teaching tool about effective communication, wrapped in internet humor. News outlets struggled to find precedent for what they had just witnessed. Political debates usually follow predictable patterns, two people arguing past each other, interrupting, making partisan points. But this had been something entirely different. A major newspaper's headline read, "Congresswoman's calm response to screaming opponent goes viral, sparks discussion about political discourse." The article noted that Crockett had managed to turn what appeared to be an ambush into a teachable moment about how democracy should work. Cable news shows spent hours analyzing the exchange. Political scientists were brought on to discuss the Crockett method, responding to aggression with calm facts rather than matching the aggression. Even late-night comedy shows got in on the action, but they focused more on Conway's over-the-top performance than on making fun of either participant. One host joked, "Kellyanne Conway literally yelled at someone for being too reasonable. That's like getting angry at someone for being too polite or too prepared." What's next? Stop being so competent. Conway tried to control the damage through her own social media. She posted a statement that read, "Had a spirited discussion about voting rights today. Sometimes passion comes through as intensity, but the issues are too important for politeness." But her followers weren't buying it. The replies were brutal. "Kellyanne, yelling at someone for being reasonable isn't passion, it's poor behavior. She stayed calm while you lost control. That's not about politeness, that's about professionalism. Maybe try reading the actual bill next time before going on TV to attack it." Conway tried again with a longer post attempting to relitigate the policy arguments, but it was too late. The narrative was already set. She had lost control while her opponent remained composed and factual. For Jasmine Crockett, the viral moment was both an opportunity and a challenge. She had gained millions of new followers overnight, but she also had to figure out how to use this attention constructively. Her response was perfectly on brand. She posted a simple video message. "Thank you to everyone who watched today's discussion. This is exactly why we need to focus on facts and treat each other with respect, even when we disagree. Democracy works best when we listen to each other." The video was shared tens of thousands of times, with comments like, "This is the kind of leadership we need more of." She turned what could have been a shouting match into a lesson about how democracy should work. Finally, a politician who shows that you can be strong without being loud. The viral exchange didn't just capture American attention, it went global. International news outlets picked up the story as an example of American political discourse. A major European newspaper ran the headline, "American Political Debate: When Shouting Meets Silence." Political commentators in other countries used the clip to discuss different approaches to democratic discourse. A Canadian political scientist appeared on television saying, "What we saw from Congresswoman Crockett represents a maturation of American political communication. The ability to remain calm under attack while still making substantive points is exactly what democratic institutions need." Foreign language versions of the clips appeared with subtitles, and international viewers commented on the stark difference between the two approaches. Comments in multiple languages praised Crockett's diplomatic skills and expressed concern about Conway's aggressive American style. universities across the country began incorporating the exchange into their curricula. Political science professors used it as a case study in effective communication strategies. Psychology departments analyzed it as an example of emotional regulation under stress. A prominent university published a paper titled The Crockett Method, Calm Authority as Political Strategy, which broke down exactly how the Congresswoman had maintained control of the conversation without ever raising her voice or resorting to personal attacks. Communication schools started teaching the Crockett technique as a method for handling hostile questioning. The key elements they identified were acknowledge the emotion behind the attack, redirect to factual discussion, ask clarifying questions, and maintain consistent tone regardless of opponent's behavior. Business leaders and corporate trainers saw immediate applications for Crockett's approach. Human resources departments began using the clip in training sessions about conflict resolution and professional communication. Executive coaching programs incorporated Crockett's techniques into their curricula for dealing with difficult board meetings and hostile negotiations. Several Fortune 500 companies reported using the viral moment as a teaching tool for maintaining composure during high-stress presentations. One CEO tweeted, "Every executive should watch how Jasmine Crockett handled this situation. This is masterclass leadership under pressure." Perhaps most significantly, the viral exchange highlighted a clear generational divide in how Americans preferred their political leaders to behave. Polling data showed that voters under 40 overwhelmingly preferred Crockett's approach, while older voters were more split. Focus groups revealed that younger viewers saw Conway's behavior as embarrassing and unprofessional, while they described Crockett as presidential and someone I could trust with important decisions. This generational split had immediate political implications. Democratic strategists noted that Crockett's performance could be a model for attracting younger voters who were turned off by traditional political combat. Republican strategists worried that Conway's approach might alienate the very demographics they needed to win future elections. The immediate political impact was significant. Democratic fundraising saw a spike as donors responded to Crockett's performance. Progressive organizations started sharing the clip as an example of effective political communication, but the impact went beyond partisan politics. Educators began using the clip in civics classes as an example of constructive political discourse. Communications professors analyzed Crockett's technique, how she stayed calm under pressure, asked clarifying questions instead of making accusations, and ultimately won the argument through facts rather than volume. Republican strategists were privately concerned. Conway was supposed to be one of their most effective communicators, someone who could go toe-to-toe with anyone. If she could be so thoroughly outmaneuvered by calm questioning and basic facts, what did that say about their broader communication strategy? The viral success of Crockett's response revealed something deeper about where American political discourse stood in 2024. People were tired of screaming matches. They were hungry for politicians who could disagree without being disagreeable, who could stand firm without being mean. Social media analytics showed that the clips of Crockett's calm responses were being shared far more than clips of Conway's outbursts. Comments on the videos consistently praised Crockett's class and professionalism while expressing embarrassment about Conway's behavior. A generational divide was also evident in the responses. Younger viewers, in particular, saw Crockett's approach as a model for how political discussions should work. Many commented that they had never seen a political debate where someone actually listened and responded to their opponent's concerns rather than just waiting for their turn to attack. Political communication experts began talking about the Crockett model, the idea that calm professionalism might be more effective than aggressive confrontation in the social media age. Several Democratic candidates started incorporating elements of her approach into their own media appearances. The incident also sparked a broader conversation about women in politics and different styles of political leadership. Conway and Crockett represented two very different approaches to wielding political power, and the public's response suggested they preferred Crockett's method. Perhaps most importantly, the viral exchange became a teachable moment about political discourse itself. Millions of Americans watched Crockett demonstrate that you could be strong without being loud, that you could win arguments with facts rather than volume, and that treating opponents with respect didn't mean being weak. The clip was shown in high school government classes, shared in corporate training programs about conflict resolution, and discussed in graduate programs studying political communication. Conway's career wasn't destroyed by the incident, but it was definitely damaged. She remained a sought-after political commentator, but bookers were more careful about matching her with opponents who might employ Crockett's calm, fact-based approach. Crockett, meanwhile, saw her national profile skyrocket. She was invited to speak at events across the country, appeared on major news programs, and became a sought-after voice for a new generation of political leaders who believed that democracy worked better when people listened to each other. The Kellyanne Conway Jasmine Crockett exchange became more than just a viral moment. It became a case study in how political communication could work differently. Instead of two people talking past each other, viewers had watched one person try to attack, while the other tried to understand and respond. The fact that the person trying to understand and respond had won so decisively sent a message to politicians across the spectrum. Maybe it was time to try a different approach. In a political environment defined by division and anger, Jasmine Crockett had shown that there was still power in being reasonable, still strength in staying calm, and still victory to be found in treating opponents with respect while standing firm on principles. The viral success of her approach suggested that maybe, just maybe, Americans were ready for a different kind of political discourse, one where the goal was understanding rather than destruction, where strength was measured by composure rather than volume, and where winning meant finding solutions rather than scoring points. What do you think about this incredible showdown? Did Jasmine Crockett handle this perfectly? Or would you have responded differently to Conway's attacks? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more political breakdowns that show how democracy really works, behind the scenes. Hit that notification bell so you never miss the moments that define American politics. Which approach do you prefer? Conway's aggressive confrontation or Crockett's calm professionalism? Let us know and share this video with anyone who needs to see what real political leadership looks like.